me, Chotsani, about how you prioritize self-care in your life and what that looks like for you.
Yes. So I'll be fully transparent and say that my self-care routine over the last few years could use a little sprucing up. I've got to go back to what I did years ago, which was to really carve out the time on my calendar to be strategic about the time. And I was really good at that, whether it was, resting, going to a Broadway show, listening to music, dancing, just centering and being still in prayer and meditation. And all of those things that I mentioned are very much a part of my self-care. And so I've got to get back to it. So these days, my self-care is really looking like time in the car, having those quiet moments before turning on talk radio, news radio, and just listening to birds as I'm driving, thinking about my day, reflecting on, and being very grateful for whatever I was able to get accomplished that day. Or I set my sights to adding it to the new list that has to get started and tended to most readily the next day. And so for me, it's taken different shapes. Because of the pace that my life has had over the last few years, as you mentioned, I soon hope to see the light at the end of the tunnel for my doctorate. And so anyone who has been on that journey is well aware that balance is not always achievable. And when it is, it doesn't look like what you used to know it to be. And so you've really got to steal those moments. And, when I'm able to do more than, have those moments in the car, I will literally go to a nearby park, sit by a pond and watch the water, watch the nature, and just sit and people watch, and literally have to say, okay, I've got to do that. I teach a class, an art class in the evenings, and thankfully it's on a beautiful landscape. It has beautiful landscape before you enter into the space. And so now with it staying lighter longer, after the class is over and the children have packed up their art supplies and everything, I literally will sit on a bench and just take a deep breath. And if I am not strategic about that, then I can easily just say, oh, well, I'll push self-care or quiet time to the next day. And that's not okay because, in theory that if you're not good to yourself, you're not good to anyone else. And you know that you can't pour from an empty vessel. We've got all those things down pat. Yeah. So, but putting it into practice is really, something you have to fight for it.
Yeah, you do have to fight for it, especially in the seasons that you're in. And you're just in a very busy season right now. But I love what you said about the time in the car, just taking those quiet moments, listening to the birds. You don't even have to manufacture that. It's just being intentional about not being so quick to turn the radio on and just sit, and taking that time that you already have. You've already got to drive home from work. You've got to already drive to work. You've already got to drive to get the kids or whatever it case may be, but being intentional about that time that you do have and making the most of it is so important. And I love, and that can, and in these busy seasons for you busy women out there, think about that. Think about if you're saying I don't have the time, think about, okay, but what about when I'm on the train or I'm in the car or I'm on the subway or, what can I just put my headphones in and listen to bird sounds or roll down the window or whatever that looks like, taking that time that you have already and making the most of it. So I'm so glad you spoke to that because it is important. And if we aren't intentional about it, it's so easy to put it on the back burner. And then we all know what the cost of that is. And that's not good for us or anybody that we're in company with. confidently setting boundaries. How do you do this right now? Because you have so many directions you're getting pulled in. So
Mhm.
talk to me about setting boundaries and if that's even something you're able to incorporate right now.
Yes. So I have been forced because
Ah,
I really don't think that if my pace was different, that I would be able to say no as often
mm,
as I have been able to. And, sometimes it's a no with a not right now.
yes.
Sometimes it's a no with a hard period at the end of it, where I just can't see how at this moment, stepping away to even wrap my brain around anything new.
Yeah.
If the train is already at the station, I can't even, figure out which way to fit it in. And so when I have that, um, um, knowing, that
Yeah.
makes it easy for me to set those boundaries. But really, I don't think that it's something that I would do quite naturally on my own. It's something that my schedule just does not allow. And so I've learned the hard way that if you don't set your intentions for the why of the thing that you're doing and the thing that you're
Ah,
saying yes to, you can easily get yourself caught up in this sort of hamster wheel.
yes.
And then, I really have learned that when I do say no, it allows the opportunity for those yeses to be even more precious, because it just frees me up to do things like this, where I can be in sisterhood, I can be in fellowship with, like-minded people and women who really help to, equally uplift and equally empower. So for me, saying those no's allows time for moments like this, where this is a conversation that is going to be so long lasting in terms of, refreshing energy and all of that. And so that's how I've had to set my boundaries, just really taking a pause. And if it's not a hard no, it's definitely, well, can't do it now, but let's figure out when I can do it where it's not such a stretch, because I always want to bring my best self to
Mm,
anything that I'm doing. And if you're, running ragged, or, you've got too many things happening where you can't even think about what the next meeting is that you're going into,
right.
that's not a good thing.
No.
And it's pretty apparent. And so I just have learned that taking a moment before saying yes is very important, but then saying no to those things that just may not be, for the season. And that's how I've had to kind of think about it. And it hasn't been easy. I'll
Yeah.
say that, because I am a person of service, but it also reminds me that you have to do things that you are that you're purposeful about. And if it's directly connected to your purpose, then that's an easy yes. But if it's something that you're not quite sure, or that's really a far reach from what you
Yeah.
are connecting your life's work to, then that's sort of an easy no. But I think the decision, and even sharing it with people, it has not been easy.
Yeah.
And so that's how I would answer that question. I hope it was pretty clear, as clear as it could be.
Yeah, absolutely it was. And I think you made an important point too of like sometimes there's a no period and sometimes there's a no later. And
Yeah.
being willing to say that too is like, and being willing to communicate that. It's like if you really want to do this thing, it can be a no later. But if it's a no period, then the people need to respect that boundary. But differentiating that you can have both, and that's okay too, depending on, but just because it's a no later, saying no and doing it later is actually a respect of giving the best quality version of yourself and your time that you can give to that thing, which is, you touched on too, which is so important. I know that you're a big proponent of this as well, taking care of our emotional health as much as our physical health. Talk to me about some practices that you use to help you with this, about your journey with this. Talk to me about that.
Yes. So it's no secret that I am a woman of faith, and I am very, very clear about my prayer time. And so for me, prioritizing that in the morning before, the day gets really hectic,
Mm-hmm.
it helps to center me. It helps to keep me grounded. And then throughout the day, not just a bookend at the start of the day or the end of the day,
Sure.
but really just thinking about the pace that I'm going. And I always am prayerful about, sustaining the quality of work that I'm able to produce. I'm always prayerful about, if you sometimes lose your words, I often say, remove me and allow, what it is that needs to be said and heard in that moment to come through me. And so that is a really big and strong part of who I am and who I show up, in the room as. And so that for me has always been front and center. And I truthfully don't think that I could do the work that I do without that grounding.
Sure.
Just because it's so challenging, and many people, while running away from some of the conversations that I have, I'm stepping right into them.
Yeah.
And so I often say, well, while most people are running from the fire, I'm walking straight into it.
Yeah.
And, sometimes the fire extinguisher is right there with you. And sometimes you've got to let it burn for a minute before you are able to address the matter at hand. And that is in my DIB work and my mentoring work. It's all a part of the work that I do that is so transformative, and it's life stuff. It's not so much of a transactional only experience, but it's so much more than that. And I know for a fact that if it were not for the way that I am prioritizing my mental health and my prayer time, there's no way I would be able to do the quality work that I'm so fortunate to do. And so.
Yeah, and absolutely. And you do it with such intention, like I said, and to meet Chotsani and engage with her is just to know her and to love her. I mean, it's just, but it's by being so intentional in the way that you are, that you were able to do that and show up that way and not have, the physical, because if the stuff you do, the work you do is tough. You are working in an environment that has not been traditionally DEIB friendly historically. So are doing the hard work in that. And that takes a toll. If you don't have some good practices in place, it will show up physically for you. I mean, there's no way around it. Mentoring side, same thing. You're dealing with, there are some mentees that are just there because they're just like, they want somebody to guide them. There are some mentees that have some deeper, harder stories, and they need that guidance and direction. And it's much more than just about helping them get through college. And there can be some really intense conversations and matches and things that go with that. And this is your work every single day.
Every single day.
And this is taking out all of your life outside of work that has all those components to it. So can't emphasize enough the importance of these practices that you have that allows you, enables you to feel well and good in every moment that you're working in. You are a champion at this, but how we can support ourselves and other women in living unapologetically.
So I appreciate that championship title, but I have to say that it's because I surround myself with women who we straighten each other up, and we help strengthen each other's back. And we'll say, listen, this is a crazy time for you. It's been that way for some time. Just make sure that you're taking a moment. We'll send, affirming quotes quotes or scripture to each other. Sometimes it's a joke. Sometimes it's just checking in on you, sis. Sometimes it's thinking about you, and I'm so grateful that the women who, I'm so blessed to know, we do that for each other. And so whenever we are feeling less than champion like, you get that little ping from someone who, and the crazy thing is that it's not always a phone call, because we just don't have the time to spend with each other on the phone. And if we do, we're in the supermarket or whatever it is. So just that little exchange of saying, how's it going? That is so, so important. And one thing that I would be remiss if I didn't mention, thinking about the physical part of my self-care, dance is just so important for me. Walking is important. And then because it's getting warmer in New York now, I'll soon be able to, take the bike out for a spin. But those physical activities just help my brain to sort of recalibrate, if you will.
Yeah.
And so I might be thinking about my research. I might be thinking about the next project that has to get done, but I'm actually moving and releasing some of that energy instead of just holding it in my brain, because I've learned that your body, can hold on to such things, and, stress can show up in different ways. And so I would add, to one of your earlier questions, that is so, so important to me. Movement is so important. I've definitely neglected yoga. Over the last few years. The yoga mat is here. I look at it. It looks at me. I will move the mat from one part of the room to the next. I have a she shed that's always in under construction, right? And so the mat is down here in that space. So I give myself grace. I'll get to it when I'm supposed to, but using that time to stretch and to just center myself for the few moments that I can do it, I've really had to take that seriously, because you don't want to get into a space where you're not able to move physically, because you've held on to stress for so long. So I would love to add that to that question from earlier.
Absolutely. And I'm so glad you brought that up. It's because I think too, for me, sometimes it's in my movement in releasing that I'll also get my newest, freshest ideas.
Yes.
Like I clear out the space, I get the movement going, and I clear out the space in my physical body and my brain. And that allows for new, fresh things. I was on a walk last week, and I was doing that. It was a very rigorous walk. I had a great, insightful, great music going. And it was I was able to clear out. And then I got back and I did my stretching, and I got on my laptop right away to write down all the ideas before I got them. So there's a lot of power in that too, in terms of clearing out, working out, but also creating new space, for that energy to continue to flow, that creativity to not get pushed back and come to the surface. So I think that's really important too.
I love that, because that, I often worry when thoughts pop into my brain to add to an idea or to enhance something. I'm saying, okay, I hope it doesn't go away. But miraculously, when I get back to the desk or to the laptop, it just comes, it floods out of the brain. So you're absolutely right that clearing the space in your mind is so beneficial. And I'm so grateful that it makes sense that that's what's happening.
The importance, and you touched on this earlier, so we'll get more specific about what your why and your values are. But you talked about earlier about, using your why and values to help determine where your boundaries come into play. Talk to me about the importance of setting and coming back to that why and values in everything you do, and how you got to that framework. I mean, your faith is a big part of this, but talk to me a little bit about that.
So I find that if you don't set that at the very beginning of your career, of your education, I think when things get a little blurry or busy or the wind is blowing, you can easily go in the direction of the wind. If
Yeah.
you don't have that strong foundation, and I've seen it happen. I know that there was a team building exercise that I presented a few years ago, and it was really directly connected to what people's core values are, and helping them to come to a place of self-awareness and actually naming what that is. So for
Yeah.
example, when things get really hectic and busy, are you inclined to overanalyze things where you can become paralyzed and not make a decision? Or are you one that just jumps into action but may not have taken the time to weigh all of your pros and cons? Or are you a person who just, it's easier for you to not give an answer or a decision, and things are just kind of happening around you? And
Yeah.
so, looking at what practices people have that they want to enhance, looking at the awareness that they have about themselves. And really it's surprising that many people haven't been able to take the time to think about those things, unless they're in the moment.
Yeah.
And sometimes when you're in the moment, that is sometimes the worst time to learn something about yourself, right?
Absolutely.
So it's like, you think about college aged students, for example. The worst time to learn how to make a photocopy is when your boss needs 1,000 copies of this document 20 minutes before a meeting, right? So if you haven't taken the time to study that copy machine and to see about the different functions of it, are you on a 2-page to 2-page setting, or are you on a 1-page to 2-page setting? You don't need to figure that out when you are pressed for time or under any kind of pressure. And so I really feel that it's so important to make the time. And there's so many exercises out there.
Oh, there really are. Yeah.
Allow people to kind of discover themselves. But I think it's really cool to, again, surround yourself with people who have no problem sharing with you what they're observing.
Yeah.
I have a dear girlfriend. We're mama friends, right? So we talk about all things children, school closures, PTA meetings, and more. And I was picking up my children. She was watching them for a few hours while I ran into work. I think it was on a Saturday program.
Yeah.
And I was just feeling so great about the experience with the new prospective students that I was meeting. And it was so wonderful. We were slapping high fives and excited about their journey. And I'm telling her all about the day. And as I'm walking down the stairs from her house, she said to me, "That is absolutely wonderful." She said, "But in all of that, you didn't mention anything about your research."
Oh, wow. Oh my God. Wow. You're like,
And Melissa, she gave me that look like I was her best girlfriend, her daughter, her good sister friend. And can I tell you, that was a game changer for me.
Sure.
Okay, because I didn't even realize that I was talking about all of this amazing stuff that happened that day. But she also was aware, because we talk about everything, that I had hit a roadblock in my writing, and I was just so exhausted and weary.
Okay.
And she was checking in on me. Like,
sure.
Okay, you're doing all this stuff for all these people and blah, blah, blah. But I didn't hear you say not one thing. And when I said, oops. So I got home, and that one statement and that one look just gave me the energy that I needed. I think I finished a whole 2 chapters that weekend.
Wow.
I think I uploaded material. And she didn't say it so that I would feel that kind of pressure. That wasn't the point.
Yeah.
But because she knows me so well, and I'm also very self-aware and so appreciative and grateful and open. And so she laughs when I tell her this story, and I'm going to make sure she hears this recording, because she is definitely going to fall out of her chair and say, well, I'm so glad. And she's so humble, so beautiful. She doesn't even know how much that one statement and look.
Well, it reframed everything for you, in the way that you needed to see it in the moment. It's so important to have those people in your life that can, and that you have that trust with each other, so that when said, it's received with the intent that it's delivered with, because you have that trust and that knowing of each other already. Because without the trust being there, and without that knowledge and sharing being there, it's that can be a hard thing to deliver if you don't have the relationship background to go with it. But we have to have those people. We have to have those, holding us, accountable, reminding us of who we are, reminding us of where we might have crossed a boundary or where we need a boundary. All those things. That's so important. I love that example. That's such a great example.
So she said it, you're right. She said it with such love and compassion that it got me into gear.
Right.
And I said, oh, okay, I guess I'm going to dust off my my writing utensils and get back to business.
Amazing. I love that. That's good. You have to have that in the foreword of everything that you release. So
I think so.
Talk, people. Here you go. I'm that friend. Oh my gosh, that's so important. I love that. Living out of your own expectations versus others. There are a lot of people that want to impose their expectations upon you because of the kind of work you do, because you are such an accessible person in terms of people want to talk to you. They want to get feedback from you. They want to be around you. And so there's a lot of expectations about your availability, I'm sure.
Yes.
In that, but also how you show up in these roles that you have, so talk to me about living out of your own expectations versus others' expectations of you.
Yes. So I love that point about accessibility. I think that is extremely important with this work, because if people don't feel that you are accessible or available, it just doesn't lend itself for authentic, life-changing conversations.
Yep.
But when you think about expectations, I think that if you are open in the very beginning about, what your role is with the respective relationship or group that you're engaging with, or people that you're engaging with, it can get very, very muddled. And, you have people who, in my experience, are on either end of the spectrum. They're very, very mindful of your time and how much you've got going on, where they may not be so inclined to ask for something that they need, right? And it almost has to get into crisis mode before they reach out.
Sure.
And then you've got people who are, listen, I need to know if I can move this period or semicolon over to the right, and can you spend a meeting of a half an hour to talk about setting up the 2-hour meeting before we have the 5-hour meeting to talk about why we had to move the period.
I'm laughing hard right now because this meeting thing that she's talking about is a real problem in her world.
Yes. And so let's discuss how we can have the meeting to discuss the PowerPoint in preparation for the meeting. It's quite a thing. And so I don't know if it's exclusive to educators or service industries, but I just know in my world you have to be very clear about when you first engage with people what those expectations are, because it's very easy to have a different understanding of why you have been introduced to each other. It's so easy to have two different conversations. You ever have a conversation with someone and walk away and say, oh, I'm crystal clear about whatever it is the thing was. But then when you send meeting notes or a recap, it's something completely different, right?
Yeah.
So the expectations that you have going into something, I think, is really important to set in the very beginning. And I've had that experience on the other end where I had never reached out to, a particular person or department or unit, and didn't realize that the person who was leading that group had been pulled on so much and had been called in for everything, that by the time I reached out, she was at her wit's end. And the delivery for her to tell me that she had to manage expectations, it didn't feel good. Because I didn't realize that she had history with not setting boundaries or expectations with others. And so I recognized that in her delivery to me, that it wasn't about me.
Yeah.
And I heard what she had to say, but I also had to, toward the end of the meeting, I felt that I needed to apologize in a way for the others who didn't respect the work that she had done or the time that she had given to said projects. Because again, by the time I came around with my ask, which was never, it was, you could tell that she had had enough with folks. Yeah. And she was and I just happened to be the one on this particular day. And, we ended the meeting with love and we were clear understanding, but I knew immediately that it wasn't about me.
Right.
I just knew, I said, well, I don't think that this is the delivery that this wasn't a part of my ask. Yeah. So let me help to kind of reshape the reason why I'm asking this. And so we I was able to do a rewind and it was all good. So your expectations of yourself and what people expect of you can vary quite differently. And you've really got to be the person who's directing that, because it's challenging, and you do want to be accessible, but with that, people who are inclined to not want to quote unquote bother you will not reach out. And so, I think approach is important. Delivery is important, and you've got to just kind of set the tone, especially when you're meeting new people, about who you are and your purpose, and of course the expectations. And it doesn't have to be that rigid, right?
Right.
You don't always have to use those terms, especially when we're thinking about meeting people for the first time. Right. But there are ways to say that where people are pretty clear. About what you're saying. And so my students, for example, will tell you that they can come and see me anytime because they are priority. And can I tell you that they will always respectfully send a note before they're coming up the hall, or they will send an email. And I didn't even say that would be helpful.
Sure.
Right?
But they just gathered that from how you interacted with them, which is so important. I mean, I think communication is kind. I mean, I think in remembering that, and I think you said something really important earlier too, is understanding, not, unfortunately, mostly for those people and the ones I came in interaction with, not everybody has an idea of communicating expectations or setting boundaries. They just haven't been given that model. They haven't chosen to follow it, whatever. And so it's so important. And when you are a person that does communicate expectations well and have your own boundaries, you recognize that quickly, but it also enables you to not take things personally, because you know that this is about them and not you, but you are a master, and I've seen you do this before, at setting the tone straight. You are so good in
Thank
these
you.
situations where there can be a conflict of a communication that's happened. You are really good at addressing it. But by the time everybody leaves the room, everyone has felt like they were heard. And that is a gift. But you do that, you do that really well, but it's because you do have all these things in place that we already talked about. But there's also that respect and empathy that you have that goes with that. So I think that's what makes you so powerful in what you do. Accepting the layered aspects of ourselves. This is accepting all the parts of us, not just the shiny parts that people get to see in public, but all those pieces that make up who we are. Talk to me about your journey with accepting all those layered aspects of yourself.
That's an excellent question. And before I answer it, I just want to highlight one of the words that you used. And I just want to share that when I am in those spaces, I don't take it for granted that is a true gift that I'm so grateful for, and I cherish it. And so I thank you for mentioning that, because it's a dance that you have to do.
It is.
But it cannot be so choreographed and scripted that you can't be open to, what comes out of that experience. And so embracing all the layers of myself, I'm definitely open to how I have evolved as a woman, as a wife and a mother. I was on a panel a few weeks ago and just talking about how you start off with one image of yourself, for example, as a mother, and then you realize that needs to really kind of go out the window based on the children that you have been given, and that you have been blessed with. And so I remember talking about another good girlfriend. She knew that I was sleep deprived before going back to work from maternity leave. And I really enjoy, believe it or not, a part of my self-care is like maintaining a comfortable, clean home, bright and airy. I love all of those, homemaking experiences. And I wasn't subscribing to the sleep when the baby sleeps theory. I was like, you know what? This child is asleep. I'm going to do laundry. I'm going to make sure that, you could hear the angels singing when you open the door. And she came by for a visit. She said, whoa, the house is stunning, but you need to sleep.
Yeah.
And she said, lock the doors. The windows are closed. The baby is not going to leave the house on her own.
No danger of that.
No danger. And our daughter is 12. Okay. Just to give you some perspective on how clear that message was to me. Yeah. So in that moment, I had to release, what and who whatever impression I had of myself as a wife and a mom, including the fact that, having dinner and laundry done by the end of the day, you're on maternity leave. That's whose expectation is that? Right? No one's.
Exactly. No. You're not trying to get to work by a certain time.
Exactly.
Yeah. Absolutely.
There was no remote work at the time. Your sole role, right, at that time is you have been excused and you've earned the time to connect, bond, and be with your newborn. So being open to, that evolution of myself was really important, and just learning to let things go, right? Knowing that you're not going to get every single thing checked off of your to-do list. And I really hesitate to use the word perfectionist. However, I have been lovingly told that I have that trait. So because of that, I don't readily embrace that term, I do recognize that I could have just tinges of those qualities. And so that can actually lead to more burnout than what it's worth.
Mm-hmm.
And so embracing those layers of myself means that it's okay to not get everything done. And you cannot put yourself last for the sake of getting everything done, right?
Yes.
And then health wise, you recognize that that catches up with you over time.
Oh, 100%.
And so, it's definitely something you have to embrace and say, okay, I need to work on that part of myself and say that this is not what you need to be focusing on right now. And let's prioritize.
Yeah.
And that's daily work, daily work. I hope that I answered that part of the question. Was there another?
Yeah, no, that was the piece of it, and you hit it so well. And I think it's just so important because I think we've all gone through that. You talk about, especially as moms, that thing of like, okay, kids are gone, whatever phase of like, kids are gone, babies asleep, kids went to bed, whatever, scramble around, and you're just exhausted. And for me, I went through that stage as well. And I just ended up feeling like a martyr. And then and that was no good for anybody. I mean, no one was benefiting from that. So, I mean, I think it's just so important to remember that and give ourselves a break. In whatever season we're in, give ourselves a break and just know, you talked about this earlier, as you're reflecting on your day, know that you did the best you could that day. And these things will be there tomorrow. And I think it's just, we have to continue to give ourselves grace. And we as women are we're not great at that, but when we see other women doing it and talking about their journey with it, I think it makes other people feel empowered to do the same. So Absolutely. That's why it's so important to have these conversations and just talk about those things.
Yeah, and different perspectives help
Absolutely.
you, and different delivery.
Absolutely,
of a message will help you. Yeah,
absolutely. In Living Out Feel, finding empowerment and embracing layers, which you do so well, tell me how this affects the quality of your relationships in terms of, if you're doing this for yourself, how you feel about your relationships and how they feel about you. Because I would argue that if you are finding empowerment and embracing your layers, you're not only liking yourself the way you should and making room to care for yourself the way you should, you're showing up better in your relationships and people actually want to be around you. Talk to me about that and your journey with that.
So it's so important. I think that you have reciprocal relationships. I think that when you are such a giver, it's very easy to have people just receive from you. But I think it's so important that people are on the same page with you. And it's not to say that you're not going to have seasons where one person is doing more uplifting than the other, right? Because that's what friendships are about. You should be able to share and just be in your most authentic relationships. But I really think that as you have your ebb and flow of life, it's really important that you're able to uplift each other when you most need it. And so those relationships that you surround yourself with are so, so important. I'm at the phase now. My good girlfriends and I joke we're at the age where we don't need new friends, if you will. Like we're cherishing the ones that we do have. And I have a large circle of family, friends, and they're all amazing. But if I meet acquaintances along the way and, we have great conversation, that's awesome. And friends are friends. And so, surrounding yourself with like-minded people, leading to those authentic relationships, I think are so, so important because we gravitate to each other. I remember when you and I first met, I remember the day that we spoke. I was traveling for a conference and I was in between a workshop session, and, you were so gracious with your time. And I think the time zone was all different and everything, right?
Yep.
You and I chatted as if we were old girlfriends from way back yonder, right? So when you have that spark and those authentic connections with people, those are the relationships that you have to cherish, that uplift you. And you have to also get to a place where you're ready to release those that don't do that, and that's not easy either.
Yes.
Right?
No, that's not. I'm so glad you hit on that. That is so important. I want to sit on that for a minute, because one, the reciprocal relationships are so important, because I think especially as women, we're conditioned to give and give and give and give and give. And that can set us up for not always be feeling like we're in reciprocal relationships. So being mindful of that, and also knowing that some relationships just have seasons, and that's okay too. And it doesn't have to mean that you don't like them anymore, or they don't like you. And you just might have gone in different directions. I mean, you might just have things that you aren't in the same season on anymore, or you've changed and you don't agree on the same things that you used to. You're just not in alignment that way, whatever that may be. You've moved. I mean, there's so many things that come into it, but sometimes we feel like if a relationship ends, it always has to mean something bad. And I think we have to release that idea and that notion. So I'm so glad you brought that up. I think that's so important. And I think we have a really hard time with that.
We do. And healthy relationships are important, because if it's so imbalanced, it can cause you to actually be the person who's drowning, and so it's really important to, and you don't have to, have a big pronouncement about, if that's even a word, about what has changed. But the other reality, and this was a hard reality for me, that there are people who just don't have the capacity, right?
Yes.
Right. And it's nothing, no judgment. It's not a thing where you feel angry. You just understand that for that particular season, it's okay to, protect your space. It's okay to, check in every now and again, but it can't be extended, prolonged periods of time, and then there's some that just don't require any attention, because it just takes up too much of the energy that you already are struggling to maintain.
Sure.
So that's, I would definitely think that that's an important part of how those relationships sort of, have shown themselves. And you have to be okay with that. You have to be okay with that.
Yeah, I agree 100%. It is, I think, part of life and the seasons that we go through. We're down to the rapid fire. So name 5 activities that nourish you.
Rest, reading, playing with my children, just being so silly. I mean, it could be charades, it could be a game of cards, or, the stare until you blink game, and who blinked first, playing tic-tac-toe, being outdoors. Yes, that was all part of number 3. Number 4, sisterhood time with my good girlfriends, and whether we have a blanket and some tea and some hot chocolate and some good snacks, just sitting around and just putting your feet up. And that's like intentional time that I so miss right now, and really, really, I can't wait to kind of get back into that rhythm of just sitting with folks and not talking about work stuff, just, life stuff. Sure. And then number 5 is my quiet time, the me time that is so important. And there's no particular order, but that's the first, of the 5 that come to mind. And just, being able to let your hair down long enough to enjoy those moments.
Yeah, being present in them, I think, is so important. It's so important. All right. 5 words on how you want to feel the next 6 months.
Resilient, rested, at peace, accomplished, and complete.
I love those. I love those. Well, Chotsani, thank you so much for the time. I'm so thrilled. And once you're Dr. Chotsani, we're going to bring you back. We're going to talk more about that because you do some really important work in your research that we didn't even get to touch on today. That is so important. I think for women to know about, for people in the world to know about. But thank you so much for this time today and carving this out. Podcast audience, you're going to want to know more about what this wonderful woman does in the world. So make sure you go to embracinglayers.com. You not only can find your episode links there, but you also can find a resources page that share the sources and things that Chotsani is involved with and things that she uses in her own life that are helpful. You can read a blog about this episode that our writer Jessica will write. So don't miss out on that, and checking us out on all the socials. You'll find our link tree on there where you can follow us and engage with us on social media and in our Substack. But again, Chotsani, thank you so much, my friend, for your time today. And podcast audience, have a great week.
Thank you. It was my honor. My honor. I'm so proud of you, and I appreciated our time together. And I'm just so thankful that you are a part of that women's circle that I talk about. So thank you.
Oh, you bet. And it's an honor to know you too. Thank you so much. All right, everybody, have a good week.